And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast from Comparoni. Paul Konyndyk, Michigan State 2-0. They defeated Niagara 96-60 here on Thursday night at the Breslin Center. Michigan State 2-0 for the first time since the 2021 season. Not as many Maalox moments as early in the season last year so far. They'll be playing Kansas next, I think it's Wednesday in Atlanta. Champions Classic. Kansas #1 ranked team in the country. So that'll be an interesting test for Michigan State moving forward. I think, Paul, I think this early season has progressed well for Michigan State. Yeah, the trip to Spain in August or whenever that was, and then the exhibition games against Northern Michigan and Ferris State. They built toward the Monmouth game and this game against Monmouth and Niagara. Both games Michigan State ended up winning comfortably, but both of those visiting teams made little runs at Michigan State, made it interesting enough, made it enough of a game that Izzo had to rip on his team a little bit at halftime and during timeout. So they got some of those things ironed out, gave them a chance to do those, to play like it's a real game. Now, against a more difficult opponent, you can't have these little lapses and leaks that they have had. But I think it's been a good build-up for Michigan State as they get acclimated to Jeremy Fears being the new quarterback, new leadership with Jaden Akins, the new captain. I think it's good for them to go down there and on a neutral court, play the so-called #1 team in the country, and then get back to work after that. I think it's been productive so far.
The one thing you can't do against Kansas is you can't fall behind 9-2 like they did tonight, and you can't miss layups. We've seen this against Kansas, or in the Champions Classic in general, when Michigan State gets out and it looks like their transition game is going and they're running, but they're not finishing. And tonight against a team that 14 new players that haven't really played together, Michigan State had some issues with, which I thought they wouldn't have wrote about last night, with all the 6'5" wing guards and all the different sizes and going up against a traditional Michigan State lineup. But what happened early is, Niagara really punched Michigan State in the mouth, scoring basically 3-pointers on 3 straight trips, and then also Michigan State with a chance to really kind of put them away in the first half, and probably would have had they made some open shots and had they finished some layups. And so yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I think like anytime you have an opportunity to face some adversity, it's a good thing, especially when you bounce back from it. Michigan State did a really good job of that in this game. Did the same thing against Monmouth. But now, as they move into, the real part of their season against a real opponent, and Kansas isn't always great this time of year, but I would like to see them do some of the things they did well in the exhibition games in these 2 games, but also some things they haven't done. And if they want to really compete with it, Kansas, they've got to hit open jumpers when they present themselves. Mm-hmm. And they have to finish.
That means Akins and Booker.
That means Akins, Booker. That means Kohler is a trailer. I don't know. Whatever, like in some of those games that happens at times where you can't get inside shots, so you got to finish. But Akins, Booker, Holloman, I think Fiddler is a guy that has to hit open shots. He hit one tonight. But to beat a good team, you've got to hit shots when they're there, and
none of those guys have been reliable shooters yet this year in the exhibitions or these 2 games.
But we've had this conversation quite a bit over the years, not with Tyson Walker, but at one time with Tyson Walker. When is he going to be a reliable shooter? I remember how many times we had a conversation about Matt McQuaid. When is that guy going to become more than a streak shooter? And it strikes me as pretty common theme that there's a lot of guys that start out their careers as streak shooters. Oh, yeah. Denzel Valentine, another guy, and they do something more with it. But until they do, you don't know if they're capable of doing it. And then you're kind of left wondering, okay, what from these games that we saw right now can translate against a big-time opponent?
Yeah, and in order to hang with them, I mean, we saw Booker make a 3-pointer tonight in transition. That looked good and smooth and natural. And then later on, he was open for one and didn't shoot. And Izzo from the sideline was like, letting Booker and letting everybody else know that he wanted Booker to shoot that shot, and Booker knew and he nodded. Later, Booker missed a couple others, but there'll be times when Booker is a first option roll replace guy, screen roll replace, and other times when it's a loose ball situation where those 3-pointers just come open to him once in a while with his height and range and high shot release and all those things. A game against Kansas, that's the type of game where he just needs to happen to be on. Jay Nakins 0 for 3 from three-point range tonight. That's a game where he kind of just needs to be on, and he was on a couple nights ago against Monmouth. So all those guys need to play their A game, which means being better than a 30% three-point shooter. In some regards, some of those guys are below 30%. For Michigan State to hang with the top 10 team, those are the components that make Michigan State capable of hanging on one night, maybe with a team like that. Kohler, a career high tonight, 20 points, 13 rebounds. Izzo was asked about it after the game, and he said, well, he's going. If you want to, how bad do you want to run? You got to go. How bad do you want to rebound? You got to go. How bad do you want to score? You got to go. In other words, he felt that Kohler went to the offensive glass after his own missed shots a couple of times, and showed up, posted up hard, called for the ball, executed some good moves against an undersized team that didn't bring a whole lot of help defense on a lot of occasions. But it was good for Kohler to score 20 against a team against which he can score 20. And Michigan State went to him a few times, ran that diamond set where it goes to the wing and then inside to him, and he goes to work. I think he's becoming a little more patient. He's not rushing himself like we talked about the other night, and he's got to feel good. 13 rebounds, going hard for those rebounds as well. And Izzo said after the game, Kohler did an interview with the Big Ten Network, then he was the last one to go into the locker room, and Izzo said the teammates were there waiting for him to shower him with water. Izzo was happy to see that. Izzo feels good about some of the blossoming leadership on this team. So he feels good about the personalities. Some of that skill level needs to hit at some point. I'm not sure it will consistently, but that's what the season's going to be about.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting about Kohler is Greg Paulus, the Niagara coach. He's a guy that we know from him playing basketball at Duke, but he was also on Thad Motta's staff. And he was asked about Kohler before you came in, and he mentioned that Kohler reminded him of one of those Wisconsin big guys. That when the ball's up in the air, he's kind of guessing where it's going to go, and he has a good idea of it, and he's fighting you for it all the way, and he brings a lot of passion, a lot of hustle, and a lot of heart to the floor. And I think that's probably one of the most complimentary things you can say, about a dude. And if you remember back in the day, and I know you do, and some of you subscribers out there, most of you probably remember some of those Wisconsin Bo Ryan teams where they really, really gutted it out and fought hard and tooth and nail for rebounds. That's a good compliment. I think Kohler deserves a lot of credit for this game. I thought he could have done this in the last game against Monmouth. He had butterfingers. But against Kansas, are you going to be able to do that? I don't know. You're going to be able to scrap for some rebounds, and that's going to be critical. One of the things I think in that game is I think that perimeter shooting, which he's worked really hard on, might bring itself to bear. He's going to have to hit maybe some 17-footers or some three-pointers at times. But, yeah, it's good. It's good if you're Michigan State to see Kohler have this type of game. And it was not easy for Kohler when you look at the matchups. I mean, it's hard to have a really dominant game like this and also have to work as hard as he did defensively with either being driven or having to try to close out on the perimeter. He had to work for everything he got tonight. So he gave pretty dang good, but he also got pretty good early, and it was good to see him fight through that, because this is the type of team that a year ago he wouldn't have been able to play as many minutes as he did against.
You mean late in the year after his injury subsided?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying in general. Earlier in his career, he would have had a hard time staying out here against teams that are like all guard type drivers. He's never been good against those type of teams. So he did a really good job on offense. But what I'm saying is, he earned that by how hard he played on defense in some unfavorable matchups. That's the whole point I'm trying to make.
I got you. He was matched up against a smaller power forward, and like Izzo said, that's a good test for what he's going to see later in the year. Not necessarily against smaller power forwards. He'll see some of those, but when you get to the Big Ten or next week, you'll see a power forward who's 6'8", who's also quick. Right. So Niagara spread Michigan State out a little bit, looked to drive when he had Kohler out there at the 4, guarding a 4 who was 6'5", like you said, who would take him off the dribble. And there were 3 or 4 times when Kohler got beat off the dribble. So that didn't go well. Like Izzo said, it was good to kind of work on that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's ever going to be able to guard someone like that. This year.
Not a lot of guys would, though. I can think of guys like Malik Hallwood might have a hard time against some of those guys. It depends on which 4 was taking him off the dribble. Like the Josiah Davis kid. I mean, he's going to be hard for anybody to guard. But the fact that he kept swinging with it, and Michigan State went big late, which is kind of surprising. I think Kohler, he did as well as he can given his limited physical ability, and a lot of a lot of bigs would have a hard time with these guys.
Yeah, Michigan State went small with Kohler at the power forward on 3 occasions in the first half. Kohler had 3 shifts at the 4 in the first half. So Michigan State's got that card to play, and Carr was productive, 20 minutes, provided some juice. Kohler got all those points, 20 points, 13 rebounds. He only played 18 minutes.
Right.
So, Michigan State's going to balance out a lot of those minutes. He's still coming off the bench. And it's maybe not a team where many players are going to be playing more than 24, 25 minutes. So I don't know how often Michigan State's going to have a player make a run at 20 and 10. But Kohler got it done tonight in limited playing time, and he feels good about it, and he should. And that skill level, he's got that skill level to finish. And did a drop step to the baseline, made that work well once or twice. Zapala is in the starting lineup. They recruited him for a reason, 7 feet. He's got a lot of size. Losing Sissoko, they needed somebody with some size and some brawn. So next week, you got your old friend Hunter Dickinson going to be playing against Michigan State. And Dickinson's a big guy. He was out. I'm not sure what the ailment was, but he missed their exhibition loss against Arkansas, and he missed their 2 exhibition games. And I think he was back in their game against Howard, which they won in a blowout. So Dickinson's back, and everybody knows he's a tough guy, skilled, big, veteran. So without somebody like Zapala, Michigan State, I'm not sure who they could put on him that would offer much resistance. That'll be a good christening for Zapala to see the type of thing he's going to see in the Big Ten. Kansas, of course, not a Big Ten team. Zapala, is he ready for this?
I don't know, but is Hunter Dickinson ready for Michigan State's transition game? To me, it's not about Michigan State's bigs versus their bigs. It's about Michigan State. Can they get out and run? Can they use their depth effectively? Because the best way to defend against Hunter Dickinson is running him. He's not a fleet-footed guy, and if he's out there a lot and Michigan State's able to run and make him run the floor, that's the best way of matching up with Hunter Dickinson. So my question isn't this, is Zapala ready? Because I think Michigan State does have some depth, and they have some experience with a lot of guys having played him. They've got some bodies, so that's a good place to start. But can Michigan State get out and run and play Michigan State transition basketball and force Kansas to run the length of the floor, force Hunter Dickinson to get out there and run? And then also, can you hit some 17-footers? If they're playing drop coverage, and Hunter Dickinson's playing drop coverage, those mid-range jumpers are there. Can you hit those? And that's always been the thing with Hunter Dickinson. He's going to score a certain amount of points. He's going to give them a certain amount of rebounds. He's going to be the villain. We all know that. But how do you beat him? You beat him by going at his weaknesses, and he's going to get a lot, but he's going to give up some. Can Michigan State maximize what he gives up?
Yeah, put him in those ball screens and have him run across the court to chase those ball screens. Fears is not a guy that's going to come off those ball screens and hit the 17-footer.
Right.
Trey Holloman, give him the green light to do that. Can, like we talked about earlier, to be competitive in this game.
Jace Richardson?
Richardson, I was going to get to that. Everybody in this game needs to play at their optimal level. That means Akins needs to have like a 2 out of 5 3-point night. Booker has to have a 2 out of 5 3-point night or better. And someone like Holloman, who's on again, off again, needs to hit a couple. That would be real nice if he could hit some shots off the ball screen against that drop coverage. And Jace Richardson played a few minutes at point guard tonight. Do you give him extra minutes at the point? Because Fears is doing such a good job in terms of assist-to-turnover ratio. And Richardson's playing a couple of minutes per game at point guard. Do you expand that? And if you do, where do you take minutes from? Fears? Is that a net positive? So Michigan State, in short, their lead quarterback is not a guy that can make them pay for a drop coverage weakness.
Yeah, and the other thing about Fears he gives you is he's a good defensive player based on what we've seen. I mean, I think that's one of the areas where he's really improved. That's one of the areas where Jace Richardson, he's coming. He's going to be a good defender, but his strength isn't what maybe a veteran guard like an Akins or a Holloman or even a Fears is. He's not quite as good a defensive player, so it's going to be interesting. You go back to Booker and you say he's got to have a 2 out of 5 night. He also can't have his head in the wrong place and all of a sudden give a guy 2 or 3 corner threes. I'll take two 3-pointers for Booker, but he sure as heck can't give up some of the stuff that he gives up. And there's a couple of times tonight where I thought he gave his guy way too much room, kind of got lost. They didn't get burned for it, but Booker needs to be dialed in, not just physically, but he's got to be maybe more mentally aware and play better defense than we've seen him play in the first 2
I'm not
games.
sure if they're going to have a 4 that shoots threes like these. These guys were all firing threes. They just came out and said, let's have fun and shoot some threes, and they were making them for a while. Last year, one of Kansas's main weaknesses was inability to shoot threes. They didn't have much depth, and they ended up being a number 4 or 5 seed, lost in the second round. They've gone to the Sweet 16, I think, once in the last 5 or 6 years. And that one time they won the national title when they had that NCAA investigation hanging over their heads, which they never had to pay a price on that thing. Now, so in terms of a 4 that Booker would be guarding, that would be launching threes.
Or driving.
Yeah, driving, sure. And the bumper car.
I mean, I don't care who. I mean, they're going to have a guy that creates some sort of matchup difficulty for him.
Yeah.
And
he has a lot of problems. I'm not sure getting out on a three-pointer will hurt him in this game.
Right. And one of the things that Niagara was doing is they were looking to attack specifically him when he was out there. He was the weak spot for them defensively.
And what I refer to as bumper car basketball, Booker trying to come along on those things. He had a real nice drive and pass to Zapala today for a little 3-footer. And Zapala, ends up, playing, 15 minutes starting, only 2 rebounds, 5 points. The width and the size that he has to play some of those bumper cars against Dickinson is going to be interesting for him. Because a lot of this is new for Zapala, some of these things, and that's going to be another level of newness.
This is a tough matchup for him. You look at that Jalen Martinez, their center who.
Niagara
centers who played like 13 minutes in this game, but he created some problems, and he was a chuck and duck type guy, for them. And Zapala had a hard time getting out on those guys, and they wanted to play small. They wanted to do what they did against Michigan State. And one of the things I give Greg Paulus credit for, I forgot that he coached for Thad Mana, but when I think back on the game that they played tonight, the spacing that Niagara had was really good for a team that's been together for as short a time as they have. And Thad Mana. One of the things that I thought he did better than anybody in the Big Ten is space the floor. And I thought Niagara did a nice job of that tonight.
If you didn't see the game, Niagara jumped out to an 11-2 lead or 9-2 lead, hit 3-pointers on 3 straight possessions, took a 9-2 lead. And later on, they scored a 3-pointer in the first possession of the second half. And at that point, they were 9 out of 20 from 3-point range, 45%.
They shot 50% from 3 against a really mediocre opponent. In their first game against a Division III school from upstate New York, Houghton. They shot 60% overall in that game. It's Division III against Division I, but they had a lot of guys shoot a lot of threes in that game.
All right. Just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being returned for their deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on the environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. So help the environment, help your state, and help yourself. Take them back. They're your lakes, your beaches, and your roads, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back for recycling. It's a message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. So Fears, I think I heard his turnover to assist ratio is somewhere like 15-3 in these 2 games. He's settling in comfortably, attacking, I think, with good decision-making, showing some physicality as a defender. All those things are well and good. The shooting component hasn't hurt Michigan State yet. That needs to come around at some point. And the way Kansas will play defense and sag off of others and make other people beat you, I think Fears is going to have some room in that game to shoot if and when he wants to.
Yeah, you just wonder, because they're going to be long too. So, I talked about the mid-range game earlier, but most of the time Kansas has some pretty good length on defense. So, and they will sag off Fears, but I don't know, Jim. I mean, I honestly have not watched. I mean, Kansas plays tomorrow night against
North Carolina,
and we'll get a good feel for them. But to go and look and see what they did last year and say it's the same team,
it's not.
It's not.
That's why I don't understand. Like, they're preseason number 1, and they might be good. Like I said, they weren't that great last year, and they bring back Dickinson, they bring back DeJuan Harris. They bring back 3 of their top 5 scorers. I mean, they lost Furphy to the NBA. They lost McCullers from a team that wasn't that great. So why they're number 1? I don't know.
Because everyone assumes that Kansas has the money. Because Kansas had the money to spend before NIL. Everyone assumes that Kansas has the money to spend with NIL and that they're going to bring in a great team. It's the name on the jersey.
They have DeJuan Harris back. They bring in A.J. Storr from Wisconsin. There's a guy named David Coit from Northern Illinois who was was he MAC Player of the Year?
Who's going to guard A.J. Storr?
Coit is 5'11", and he was 5 out of 10 for 3-point range the other day. Storr is struggling for them. Storr was very good at Wisconsin. Bill Self had a comment earlier this week saying that Storr needs to get more downhill. Reading between the lines, I've not seen him play yet, but Bill Self is big on ball movement and making decisions and getting downhill with it. And he comes from Wisconsin, where you milk some time, and you clear out, and you dribble, dry, and you back somebody down. So there's a different pace from Wisconsin to Kansas, and Storr is still getting used to that. And they've got another transfer, 6'5", Zeke Mayo from South Dakota State. So you got a transfer from South Dakota State, transfer from Northern Illinois, transfer from Wisconsin. You got the freshman coming in, Flory. What's his name? Michigan State recruited him, and he's doing some decent things. You have Dickinson. How that equates to number one in the country, I'm not really sure. I mean, Alabama added the guy from Rutgers, the center. I forget his name, but they had a rim protector to go with Sears, who might be the best guard in the country. Alabama's got a lot of people back, a lot of dangerous things. So, who's number one and number two? I can see why someone would say Alabama. Kansas, the name on the front of the jersey. We'll see.
And we don't know, you say Storr's struggling, but are they going to do some things that can Bill Self do some things that make it a little bit easier for him? And he has had some hell of good games against Michigan State. And never discount that. A guy that's played well against one team. I mean, he has dominated against Michigan State. So I'm always leery of any guy that's had success against Michigan State, continuing to do that. Maybe he won't. Maybe this will be an anomaly, or maybe he will struggle in a new system. But I wouldn't bet the house on it.
One good thing is Kansas is number one in the country. We've seen what number one in the country usually looks like, and for Michigan State to have a chance to get in this game and stay within 10, stay within a touchdown, maybe even do better than that, it's a chance to look good against a so-called number one, who I'm not sure is the usual garden variety number one at this point.
Yeah, and we see Michigan State in some of these games, if they get the transition game going, if they can clear defensive rebounds. We've seen them beat a Kentucky that was ranked really highly a couple of years ago. We've seen them beat Kansas in the past, and we've seen back at the United Center, Denzel Valentine get hot, and that with a team that also played in Europe in the summer, went in there and won that. But the thing is, with those teams, with those Champions Classic wins, you've always had a guy for Michigan State, like a guard that absolutely takes over the game. Keith Appling, finished his career on a real down note because he was hurt, but in the Champions Classic, he might have played his best game of the year. Denzel Valentine, had a triple-double in that Champions Classic win over number 2 or number 1 team. And, Jaden Akins is feeling good about himself, had a good opener against Monmouth. He felt good about himself tonight. There's no, diminished confidence, but we haven't seen him have that game. And maybe he doesn't have to, but there's so many different pieces on this Michigan State team. It's really hard for a whole bunch of pieces to have, really big games. I think Jaden Akins didn't need 23 points tonight because Trey Holloman had a good game coming off the bench, because Franklin Fiddler had 11 points in this game, because Jace Richardson had another double-figure game. But against the top teams out there, when you play them, you really have to have a lead guard that does some serious damage. And it's really hard to win a game or be competitive against one of those teams unless you have a really dominant performance from one of your big-time guards. Yeah. And we've seen the same thing for Michigan State, for teams that play Michigan State. Some of the teams that Duke has had that have played Michigan State, or Kentucky, or whomever, they've got one guy that steps up and a bunch of complementary pieces. Yeah. Right now, we don't know who that guy's going to step up for Michigan State. We don't know if they have a guy that's capable of doing that against a high-level opponent. Yeah, and against Kansas, with the way they're going to play good defense, and when the shot clock gets down to 6, 5, 4, who's that guard that's going to, turn chicken into chicken salad and make it work for you? Tyson Walker was the guy that he always deferred to in the past. He did a good job with it. I like a lot of what Akins is doing, of course, with his defense. Rebounding, got 5 or 6 again tonight. Their second leading rebounder. He's working hard that. He's running the floor well, doing all those things. And there's one time when he went in that helped Michigan State's run that answered the 9-2 lead. He refused the ball screen, and his drove went in, and I think he dunked on that one. For him to know that he's got the green light to refuse a ball screen, go in and drive. Last couple of years when he's tried to drive or create something, it's not gone well. It's been messy. That's not as messy this year. And his handle is better. His feel is better. The shooting component, that's the only thing that needs to come together, and that's something he's been good at throughout his career. Tonight it left him again. They ran some plays for him.
to get those open threes and didn't go down. If he gets the shooting to come around, he can be everything that they need him to be and want him to be. We haven't seen it consistently yet. They need it in this game.
Yeah, and I think they've got some pieces that, I think the floor is different than it was last year because you have to account. I think you have to count for more for Michigan State. But if they could get some perimeter shooting, then you can really see those pieces go to work.
Yeah, because I think defense is going to be good. They're trying to get the fast break together. That has the ability to be a strong component for this team. Maybe not so much with Fiddler out there, but when they go to the bench and bring in Carr with Akins running those wings, that could be pretty good as well. So, Michigan State, I can think of times early in the season when they've taken on highly ranked teams, like the time they played North Carolina on the aircraft carrier the very first time. Michigan State was not supposed to be very good. Ended up having Draymond Green. No one knew much about him at the time nationally. And they scrapped and rebounded, went toe-to-toe, lost the game. But a week later, they were doing it again, I think maybe against Duke. Ended up being a very good team that won a Big Ten title. I'm not saying Michigan State's ready for that yet, but it kind of surprised everybody. Sometimes these teams that Izzo has that don't have the preseason notoriety, when you get the brass tacks together, the defense, the rebound, and the transition game, they can go out there and play and punch above their weight class a little bit. I'm not predicting that'll happen. It would not stun me. It's worth watching because it is Izzo, and he feels good about the leadership on this team and the way guys are all in for the team, as he said after this game tonight. Whether or not they've got that skill level to get them over the top remains to be seen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they trade some punches for a while.
No,
Paul.
and I think one of the things that Michigan State does well when Tom Izzo's got when they have the capacity to surprise people, it's when they have more depth than people realize going in. So I think that's a component. Also, Michigan State has three guys that can play point guard. Legit play point guard, and with Fears, with Holloman, with Richardson, and then Akins isn't a point guard, but on some teams in the country he could be that guy. But Michigan State has three good point guards. They have a lot of different pieces. They have a lot of different ways in which they can win. They've got some skill in some certain areas, and they can get to the free throw line better. I said that going back to the exhibition game against Ferris. I think that this team will get to the free throw line much more frequently than they have in years past. And Fiddler's a big part of that, but it's not just Fiddler. Being able to get the ball inside, playing inside out, that's like that's what you have to do to earn trips to the free throw line.
And still need to see Fiddler come around and be what he's capable of. We're not really sure how he's going to fit in, what he's going to be. He's starting. He's a senior, transferred in for a reason. That needs to start clicking for them. It's a long season, and it's an early test. It'll be a fun test to watch.
And I thought he was solid tonight. Izzo said as much, too, like with 11 points. If he converts a couple of those layups that he didn't, shots that we've seen him make in the past, he scores 15 points, 16 points in this game.
There's a couple of rebounds that Izzo thought he should have had, and that's why he lit into him at halftime. And then he came out and had a real strong offensive rebound, put back foul, hit the free throw.
But he's also because this is a guy that, at his old stop, he did a whole lot of stuff and he was a hero. He's also learning how to get yelled at, learning, how to get corrected when maybe some of those things he wasn't getting corrected in the past for because he had to pace himself. This is a whole new challenge for him playing for this program, and then being on a team that wants to run. He's not built for that. And, that's tough when you're playing the three. I even think of like Malik Hall. It was tough for him when he was playing the three to get out there and run because Michigan State really demands a ton from their wings when it comes to running.
Yeah, and he played 18 minutes tonight. Probably going to play 18 to 20 most nights, provided he becomes productive. But 20 minutes at Michigan State is a hard and fast 20. It's not a glide and score 30 at Omaha. So Izzo's talked about him learning how to, and he mentioned that in the press conference today. However you play, he didn't mention him by name, but however hard you played at your former place, well, we play a different way at Michigan State. So Fiddler is still in the process of being programmed. Izzo feels good about the way his team, the players are listening. He feels good about the leadership starting to show itself. Akins and Trey Holloman, the captains. And, of course, Fears is a captain in the making at some point. So Izzo likes the personalities. He likes the team that he has as an audience. He feels he's getting through to them. And Izzo will work with something like that. He feels good about working with a team like that.
Trey Holloman is, I know everyone thinks that Jeremy Fears, he's the captain because he's always been called like the floor general and whatnot. But Trey Holloman's a guy that was born for being a captain. This is something he really wants to be, something he worked at so hard over the summertime, bringing all these new pieces in, making everyone feel like they had a home. He's really excited about this. And Jaden Akins isn't a natural captain, but he's grown into that role, and it's something he takes seriously. It's something he's proud of.
Apparently.
Talking to him tonight about that a little bit, and these guys have embraced it, and I think it's a good deal. I think these guys are pretty close, and you've got to be. With this many players on the roster, you have to be close, otherwise things can fall apart really quickly.
Izzo said, he mentioned it to us in the press conference after the game. That's when he announced who the captains are. He also mentioned that Akins' confidence has really skyrocketed lately, which is good. So he must be he's seeing something in Akins. Yeah. Something is blossoming there personality-wise for Izzo to make this decision now. He's named captains in preseason in the past or whatever, but he's never come out after game number 3 and said at a press conference, there's a reason he did it, because he feels that Akins is blossoming, and he wants to give him more now also. So Izzo, when I say he feels good about the audience that he has in these players, he mentioned also that last night he had a meeting with 7 of the players. I assume it's the 7 non-starters. And talked to them about what he calls some strange lineups that they're going to be using. What it means is there's going to be nights when you're playing 8 minutes a game. Right. And he said, hey, he said the players are all in, and he emphasized that phrase. So he's happy that that's the way it sounds and looks right now. And what Izzo, he hasn't said this, but why that's good is because for the previous 2 years or 3 years, he never knew what in the hell he was going to get from a leadership standpoint with the players that he had. And it would change from week to week and game to game and night to night and practice to practice and meeting to meeting. And he never knew what the hell he was going to get from mainly one guy. So now that's out of the way, giving more to Akins, giving more to some other guys coming up, and Izzo feels good about it.
You know what? I don't want to say I told you so. You talk about one guy, but he recruited that guy.
I don't want to name names.
He recruited that guy and knew what he had coming in, and he paid for it. And he kept on trying to make it work over and over again, and it didn't.
Because, that player kept showing signs of coming around, and that guy almost left after his sophomore year and junior year. And
he should have.
Well, yeah. So Izzo's excited about what he's got now.
And Akins tonight, going back to him, it wasn't news to him that he's captain. He's like, I've been captain, I've been doing the captain job. Me and Trey have been doing that. Well, that's been our role. So it was new to us. We heard about it, and Izzo's making a big deal about it. But Akins knows he's the captain, knows he's been the captain. One thing he did say to me, and I've been around Akins enough where I can tell when he's saying something he means, or he's just saying it because it needs to be said. He said that he's confident. He's got confidence, and the way he said it was confident. There was no trepidation there. There was nothing like I'm really worried about this. He talked about a shot, and it wasn't a big deal to him. He knows it's going to come around, and his confidence level is different. And he, he carries himself like a senior that's going to be able to stay from start to finish and do well. And that's good to see.
All right, Michigan State's 2-0. The opponents came in this week. They were good sparring partners. They made Michigan State sweat a little bit, and when Michigan State showed a little leakage, they made them pay. Michigan State had to bounce back, and they put up, 96 points today? Is that what it was? Yeah. That looks pretty good. Had, 5 guys in double figures?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, to me, I don't want to put too much into this because this team got run out of the gym. I mean, they had enough to do some damage to Michigan State, but, like the Monmouth coach said, is they made us sweat through our jerseys in the first half, and by the second half, we didn't have enough left for them. Mm-hmm. At a certain point in this, you look at, I think it was Michigan State had a 12-point lead 27 minutes into this game. And then Niagara started to fall apart. Michigan State just pounced on them, and it was like 1-13-1 run, and then another one, and then there was an offensive rebound city. The big guy fouled out. That's not going to happen with a team like Kansas, because Kansas is not going to sweat through their jerseys against Michigan State. They might make them work. That's true, but, this is what was supposed to happen, tonight against Michigan State with these guys. And it's to Michigan State's credit, they use their depth. And that's what they're going to be able to do against a lot of non-conference opponents. But, can you play at a high level with this many pieces against a really good team? We'll find out pretty soon.
Right. All right. Anything else, Paul? No. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Breslin Center with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.